Welcome to your own personalized deep dive. You've given us this whole stack of resources, key insights from some of the top startup books of the last 20 years, and we even threw in some timeless classics too. It's like we made you the ultimate Cliff Notes, but way more insightful and way more fun.
Yeah, exactly. We're here to help you kind of extract that essential wisdom from these really influential works. We'll uncover the patterns, the surprising contradictions, and ultimately what you can take away from all this startup savvy, no matter what your experience level is.
Perfect. So let's just jump right in. One thing that really jumps out from pretty much every single book is this huge emphasis on validating product market fit right up front.
Yeah, for sure. It's not even just a suggestion. It's crucial. If you want to survive the lean startup, it advocates for the minimum viable product approach, the MVP, to test your assumptions quickly.
And we've got your notes here too. You flagged a concern about testing marketing channels before having a solid product to sell.
Right, and that's a great question. So let's dive into how these concepts apply to your situation specifically.
Okay, sounds good.
So think of it like this. Ries is all about getting something out there fast to gather that real-world feedback. But in your case, that might look like a business. Partnering with complementary businesses to reach your target audience first. Offering a service that addresses the core problem, even if you haven't built the full tech solution yet.
Oh, I see.
This way, you're minimizing risk. You're out there getting feedback before investing heavily in development. But then Founders at Work comes in with a bit of a word of caution. They tell that story about Ars Digita, the company that took venture capital way too soon and ended up losing control.
Oh, ouch. Yeah, that's a scary story.
Yeah, it is. And you highlighted a similar concern in your notes about potentially giving up too much equity early on. So while speed is definitely important, it's super crucial to balance that with making sure you're the one in the driver's seat, especially when it comes to funding.
Okay, so first, big takeaway. Don't skip the validation step, no matter what. Figure out if people actually want what you're building before taking on a ton of investment or giving up control.
100%. Now let's move on to another recurring theme we see all over these resources. The power of niching down. It might sound counterintuitive, but starting small can actually lead to way bigger wins in the long run.
Yeah, we see that bowling pin strategy in crossing the chasm, right?
Yeah.
You knock down one pin, your niche, and then the rest will follow. It seems like you have a lot of notes on this one, so it's clearly on your mind.
It's a big one. And then you've got Peter Thiel in 0 to 1, taking it even further. He's all about achieving a monopoly. In your niche, competition is for losers, he says. Pretty bold statement.
It is, but how does that actually work? I mean, looking at your notes on your idea for a language learning app for kids, is a monopoly even realistic in a space that's already pretty crowded?
Well, Thiel's argument is that by focusing on a very specific problem for a very specific group, you can become so good at solving that problem, so attuned to the needs of that audience, that you basically become the only game in town. It's about dominance through specialization.
Okay, so how does that play out in a market like yours? Like, does that even apply?
That's the million-dollar question, right? I think it depends on how you define your niche. If you go too narrow, you might limit your growth potential. But if you can identify a sizable market with a burning need that you can address in a way that no one else can, well, that's when things get interesting.
I see.
And Crossing the Chasm actually talks about this tension, the need to appeal to a larger market while still maintaining a strong foothold in your initial niche.
Got it. So maybe it's not about literal world domination, but more about becoming the undisputed leader in a space that's big enough to really matter?
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where you can dominate a market that has real potential for growth.
Makes sense. Now, onto another crucial aspect that comes up again and again in these books, iteration. It seems like startups need to be nimble, adaptable, always evolving.
100%. Think of a startup like a ship navigating uncharted waters. You need to constantly adjust your course based on the conditions, the feedback you're getting, the obstacles you encounter. Rework is pretty adamant about this. They basically say, throw those rigid business plans right out the window.
Don't worry, be crappy. Gotta love that advice from Guy Kawasaki in The Art of the Start, right?
Exactly. It's all about embracing that lean startup philosophy. Build, measure, learn, and iterate. Your first version doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be out there, getting that real-world feedback so you can improve.
Speaking of feedback, it feels like almost all of these books are kind of obsessed with putting the customer at the heart of everything.
And there's a really good reason for that. It's not just about being nice, understanding your customers, their needs, their pain points. That's like the foundation of building a product that truly resonates. Founders at Work has some great examples of companies like Flickr, who completely pivoted based on what users actually wanted, not what the founders initially envisioned.
Yeah, it's like Steve Jobs' obsession with that user experience, right? He was all about making products that were not only functional, but also beautiful and intuitive.
Exactly. The takeaway here, don't build in a vacuum. Engage with your users, really listen to their feedback, and let that guide your product development. Happy customers equal a thriving business.
Okay, so we've got a validated product. We're laser focused on our niche. We're iterating based on customer feedback. Now we need a kick-ass team to make it all happen.
First who, then what?
Right.
Right. That's Jim Collins in Good to Great. And you've got excerpts from that book and The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, both emphasizing how important it is to build the right team from the very beginning.
And Horowitz really drives home the importance of culture, too,
Mhm.
right? Transparency, trust, honesty. These are the cornerstones of a successful team, especially as you start to scale. It can't just be about individual talent. It's about how those individuals work together.
Exactly. It's like assembling a superhero squad. Each member brings their unique superpower, and together they become unstoppable. But that only works if they can function as a unit.
Right. So that takes more than just talent. It takes shared values, a common vision, and a deep sense of trust.
Yeah, for sure. It's not just about finding people who can just do the job. It's about finding people who believe in what you're building and are committed to the journey, no matter how challenging it gets.
Speaking of challenging, let's talk about the less glamorous but equally important side of startups.
Bootstrapping
Yeah.
and financial discipline. Time for a little reality check. You're probably not going to be swimming in cash right away.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Probably more like ramen noodles
Yeah.
and late nights.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of bootstrapping. Rework really champions this idea of starting lean, using your own resources, proving your concept before you go chasing those big investments.
Yeah, good too. Touches on this too. The companies that achieved greatness weren't always the ones with the biggest budgets. They were the ones that were the most resourceful and strategic with how they use their funds. They focused on sustainable growth, not fleeting hype.
Exactly. It's all about being smart with your money, avoiding unnecessary spending, focusing on profitability over those vanity metrics. You know, those early days can be tough, but they can also be incredibly creative and rewarding. Okay, so we've got a solid team. We're being financially savvy. We've built what seems like a great product. And now it's time to get the word out. You've got Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 and Crossing the Chasm here, both emphasizing the crucial role of marketing and distribution.
Right. You can have the best product in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it's not going to succeed. Thiel is adamant about incorporating distribution into your product development from the very beginning. It's not an afterthought. It's an integral part of your strategy.
So it's about figuring out your go-to-market plan. Early on, are you going viral, building a sales team, partnering with others?
The key is to be deliberate about it. Who is your target audience and where do they hang out? What's the message that will resonate with them? What channels will reach them most effectively?
We've covered a lot of ground here, but there's one final theme I want to touch on before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive: persistence and resilience. The startup journey is going to be a wild ride, and every single one of these books emphasizes the importance of staying the course, even when things get tough.
Oh yeah, for sure. Buckle up. Because there will be setbacks, there will be rejections, there will be moments when you question everything. It's just inevitable. But it's how you respond to those challenges that will ultimately determine your success. Ben Horowitz has this whole concept of the struggle and the hard thing about hard things. It's not just you. Every founder goes through it.
So how do you weather those storms? How do you keep going when everything feels like it's falling apart?
What comes down to a few things. First, having a crystal clear vision and a deep belief in what you're building. That's what keeps you going when the going gets tough. Second, building a strong support system. Surround yourself with mentors, advisors, fellow founders who have been there and can offer guidance and perspective.
And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Exactly. No one has all the answers. And admitting you need help is a sign of strength, not weakness. And finally, it's about embracing the learning process. Every setback, every failure is an opportunity to learn and grow. It's about having that grit factor, the determination to keep going, even when it's hard.
Wow. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We talked about the importance of early validation, niching down, iterating based on feedback, building a great team, being financially disciplined, getting the word out, and most importantly, having the persistence and resilience to weather the inevitable storms.
And this is really just scratching the surface. These books are packed with so much valuable advice, and we've only just begun to unpack it all.
Exactly.
Welcome back to our deep dive into startup wisdom. We covered a ton in that first part, but there's still so much more to uncover.
Yeah, it's honestly kind of fascinating to see how these authors, while they all share some pretty common themes, they also offer these like unique perspectives.
Yeah.
And sometimes they even kind of contradict each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Makes you realize there's no one right way to build a company.
Absolutely. No magic formula, no paint by numbers. It's about taking all this wisdom, filtering it through your own lens, and finding what works for you in your specific situation.
Totally. It's like a buffet of knowledge. You pick and choose what resonates with you and leave what doesn't.
It's exactly. Speaking of picking and choosing, let's talk about funding for a minute. While most of these books really emphasize financial discipline and bootstrapping, Ben Horowitz in The Hard Thing About Hard Things kind of has a different take.
Right. He actually advises taking cash whenever you can, because running out of money is the ultimate startup killer.
Yeah, he's basically saying you can have the best idea, the best team, the best product, but if you run out of runway, game over.
So it's like a balancing act.
Right.
Being smart with your money, but also being opportunistic when it comes to securing funding.
Exactly. You need to strike that delicate balance between frugality and ambition. It's about knowing when to bootstrap and when to seek outside investment.
Another point of contention among these authors is this whole idea of disruption. Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma. It's basically the Bible on this topic.
Oh, for sure. He shows how startups can topple these huge giants by targeting markets that have been overlooked or offering these simpler, cheaper solutions. Think Netflix versus Blockbuster or Uber versus traditional taxis.
Right. But then some of the other authors, like Guy Kawasaki, they're more focused on creating something truly new and valuable, not just disrupting for the sake of it.
Right.
They argue that true innovation is about creating these entirely new markets, not just stealing share from existing ones.
Yeah, it's a subtle but important distinction. Disruption can be a powerful strategy, but it's not the only path to success.
So how do you know which approach is right for you?
Well, it all depends on your vision,
Yeah.
your market, and your product. If you see an opportunity to create a truly new market, that's incredibly exciting. But if you see a way to disrupt an existing market with a superior product or service, that's valid too.
So it's all about finding the approach that aligns with your goals and your strengths.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that every single founder struggles with, making those tough decisions. You flag this in your notes, and it's something that comes up repeatedly in these books.
Yeah, there are just so many decisions to make, and so many of them don't have easy answers. It can feel super overwhelming at times.
So much. And that's where Ben Horowitz's wisdom really shines. He doesn't sugarcoat things at all. He talks about these agonizing choices you have to make as a CEO, like having to let go of loyal employees or pivoting away from a product that you've poured your heart and soul into.
Right. His stories are so raw and honest, and they offer a real glimpse into the emotional roller coaster of building a company.
Absolutely. He emphasizes the importance of being decisive and facing those hard realities head on. Don't procrastinate. Don't avoid those tough conversations. Make the call and move forward.
He also talks about this difference between a peacetime CEO and a wartime CEO.
Yeah, during times of crisis, you have to switch into a different mode. It's about survival. It's about making the tough calls, even when they're unpopular.
And speaking of tough calls, you mentioned in your notes a situation where you had to make a particularly difficult decision. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, so it involved having to lay off a team member who was a really talented developer, but just wasn't a good fit for the company culture anymore. It was a tough call. But ultimately, it was the right decision for the company as a whole.
It sounds like you had to weigh a lot of different factors and really consider the long-term implications.
Oh, for sure. And that's what making tough decisions is all about. Thinking strategically, gathering the right information, and ultimately trusting your gut.
So how do you develop that kind of mental toughness? It's one thing to read about it in a book, but it's another thing to actually put it into practice.
Well, it's a combination of experience, self-awareness, and having a really strong support system. You need to put yourself in situations where you're forced to make tough calls and learn from those mistakes.
And surround yourself with people who can offer guidance and perspective.
Exactly. Mentors, advisors, fellow founders. Don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. No one have all the answers. And seeking advice is a sign of strength, not weakness.
It's really interesting to see how these authors, even though they come from all these different backgrounds and have different experiences, they all converge on this idea of resilience. They all emphasize the importance of staying focused, staying positive, and never giving up.
Yeah, it's like that famous quote. It's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
Totally. Building a startup is a marathon, not a sprint. You're going to face obstacles, you're going to stumble. But it's that ability to get back up and keep going that separates the successful founders from the rest.
That actually brings us to a point you highlighted in your notes, the feeling of being overwhelmed by all the advice out there.
Oh yeah, there's just so much information, so many different approaches. It can be totally paralyzing.
It's like trying to drink from a fire hose.
Exactly. And it's easy to get caught up in trying to follow someone else's playbook, even if it doesn't feel quite right.
I think the key is to remember that these books are just frameworks. They're not recipes. They offer guidance, but they don't dictate your every move.
So how do you navigate all that? How do you find your own unique path through all the noise?
It's about trusting your gut, experimenting, and being willing to iterate.
It's about finding what works for you, not blindly following someone else's formula.
Exactly. And embracing that learning process. The startup journey is all about continuous learning and adaptation.
So it's not about finding the answer. It's about finding your answer.
Precisely. And that's what makes the startup journey so exciting and challenging. It's a journey of self-discovery as much as it is about building a company.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of these high-level concepts. Let's get down to brass tacks. What are some actionable takeaways from these books?
One thing that really stands out to me is the importance of simplicity. Rework really hammers this home.
Keep it simple, stupid. KISS. Right. It's a classic design principle that applies perfectly to startups, too.
For sure. Don't overcomplicate things. Build the simplest version of your product that solves that core problem and iterate from there.
Focus on the essential
Yeah,
and strip away all the extraneous stuff.
exactly. Another key takeaway is the power of storytelling. Guy Kawasaki talks about this extensively in The Art of the Start.
Right. He emphasizes how important it is to craft a compelling narrative that captures people's imaginations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Your story is what connects you with investors, customers, employees. It's what makes your company stand out in this super crowded market.
It's about communicating your vision and your passion in a way that really resonates with people.
Right. And it's not just about words. It's about backing up that story with actions and results.
You actually mentioned in your notes that you've been struggling to articulate your company's story.
Yeah, it's something I'm working on. I know it's important, but it's hard to distill it down to its essence.
Well, maybe we can brainstorm some ideas. What's the core problem you're solving? What's so unique about your approach? What's the impact you're trying to make?
Wow, those are great questions.
Ew.
I think I need to spend some time reflecting on those.
It's a process, but once you nail your story, it's going to be a powerful tool for your company.
Totally agree. Okay, one last actionable tip before we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Hit me with it.
Build a culture of learning. This comes up in all these books.
Yeah, from the lean startup to good to great. Continuous learning is super important.
Right. Encourage experimentation. Gather data. Analyze your results. And be willing to adjust course based on what you learn.
It's all about embracing that growth mindset and never stopping that learning process.
And remember, failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the process.
So embrace those mistakes, learn from them, and keep moving forward. That's how you build a truly resilient and innovative company.
Well said.
I'm feeling pretty inspired.
Me too.
Yeah.
These books are such a treasure trove of insights and inspiration.
We'll be back soon with the final part of this deep dive, where we'll explore some even more advanced concepts and leave you with some thought-provoking questions to ponder.
Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing those boundaries.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our Startup Wisdom Deep Dive. It's amazing how much we've already covered, right? I feel like I've earned an honorary MBA just listening to all this incredible advice.
I know, right? It's really incredible how much wisdom is packed into these books.
So for this last part, let's zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture. What are the overarching themes that kind of connect all these different books? What are those fundamental truths that every aspiring founder really needs to understand?
Okay, big picture thinking, I like it.
One thing that really strikes me is the importance of vision. You've got notes from pretty much every single one of these books highlighting that.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Every successful startup, every company that really makes an impact, it starts with a clear understanding of what they're trying to achieve and why it even matters. It's not just about making money. It's about making a difference. Guy Kawasaki calls it the make meaning concept in The Art of the Start.
So it's about having a purpose, something that drives you beyond just profits, something that keeps you going when things inevitably get tough.
Exactly. That vision is what guides you through all the ups and downs of the startup journey. It's like your compass. It points you in the right direction, even when the terrain gets really rough.
And speaking of rough terrain, Another theme that comes up again and again is the power of adaptability. Like, the startup world is constantly changing, so you need to be able to adjust your plans and strategies on the fly.
For sure. The lean startup methodology that we see in the lean startup and rework, it's all about embracing change
Hmm.
and iterating based on feedback.
Yeah.
And you also have notes from founders at work highlighting all these companies that succeeded because they were willing to pivot when their initial plans didn't quite work out.
So it's about being flexible, responsive,
Yeah.
and willing to experiment. That ability to adapt, it's crucial for navigating an ever-evolving market.
Absolutely. And the final theme I want to touch on is the importance of resilience. Building a startup is hard work. There will be setbacks, there will be rejections, you'll have moments of self-doubt. You've got Ben Horowitz, the hard thing about hard things in your stack, and he does not sugarcoat it at all.
The struggle is real.
It really is. The key is to develop a thick skin. Learn from your mistakes and never give up on your dreams. It's about having that grit, that determination to push through the tough times and come out stronger on the other side.
So it's a combination of having a clear vision, being adaptable, and being resilient.
Exactly. Those are like the foundational pillars of true success.
And throughout this whole deep dive, it's become super clear that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to building a successful startup.
Right.
Right. Each company, each founder, each journey is totally unique.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that makes the startup world so fascinating. There are common principles, for sure, but the specific tactics and strategies will always vary depending on your industry, your market, and your product.
It's like playing jazz. You have the basic chords and scales, but it's up to each musician to improvise and create their own unique sound.
I love that analogy. It's about finding your own rhythm and style, your own voice in the market.
So knowing all that, what's the one piece of advice you would give to aspiring founders, based on all the wisdom we've uncovered from these books?
If I had to choose just one, it would be this. Be true to yourself. Build something that you're truly passionate about, something that aligns with your values. Because when you're facing those inevitable challenges, it's your passion and your purpose that will keep you going.
So don't chase trends. Don't try to be someone you're not. Find your own path and build something that you're truly proud of.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to take risks. The startup journey. It's all about stepping outside your comfort zone and embracing the unknown. Remember, the greatest rewards often come from taking the biggest leaps.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into all this startup wisdom, I want to leave you with one final thought. The world needs more innovators, more dreamers, more people who are willing to challenge the status quo.
Right. If you have an idea that you're passionate about, don't let fear or self-doubt hold you back. Take that first step and see where it leads. You never know what you might create.
The startup journey, it's definitely not for the faint of heart, but it can be one of the most rewarding experiences you can have.
So go out there, build something amazing,
Yeah.
and
Right.
change the world.
Right.
And remember, we're always here to cheer you on.
Happy building.